Farmer refuses to give a home to abandoned elderly woman, but when she leaves, everything changes. Eleanor Vance had nowhere else to go when she arrived at that remote ranch in the countryside. Her children had left her at an assisted living facility 6 months earlier, promising visits that never happened, and she ran away from there on a rainy morning with only an old bag and an abandoned kitten she found on the road. That's when she knocked on the gate of Willow Creek Ranch and saw the man in a denim shirt leaning on the fence, watching her with that hard look that seemed capable of cutting glass. Eleanor held the grey kitten against her chest, feeling her legs tremble with exhaustion. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Eleanor. I'm looking for a place to stay. I can work, cook, clean, look after chickens. I don't need a salary in dollars, just a little corner and some food." The man looked her up and down, noticing the worn-out clothes, the holey shoes, the skinny kitten she was holding. His face showed no compassion. "I don't need anyone," he replied curtly. "You've come to the wrong place." "Please, sir," insisted Eleanor, "I have nowhere to go. My children left me at an assisted living facility and I ran away. I'm not asking for charity, I'm offering work." "That's not my problem," he cut her off. "Go back to your children. This ranch is not a shelter for strangers." Eleanor felt the tears burning her eyes, but she refused to cry in front of him. She had learned over her 68 years that tears didn't change the heart of someone who had already decided to be hard. "Do you have a name?" she asked, changing tactics. "Silas," he replied, surprised by the question. "Silas Sterling, and now that you know, you can leave." "Mr. Silas," said Eleanor with dignity, "I will leave, but first I want you to know that I don't judge you for your refusal. We all carry our wounds, and sometimes they make us build walls so high that not even light can get in. May God bless you." She turned her back and began to walk down the dirt road, moving away from the ranch. Silas stood still, watching that fragile figure walk away with the kitten in her arms. For a second, something tightened in his chest, but he ignored it. He had learned to ignore a lot of things in the last 5 years. The big, empty house awaited him. The walls that once echoed with laughter now only returned silence. Silas went in, closed the door, and returned to his mechanical routine: cold coffee, lonely dinner, sleepless nights staring at the ceiling. Ever since Clara left, ever since she packed her bags one random morning and said she couldn't stand living with a man married to the land anymore, the ranch had become just work. There was no longer a home there. Outside, night fell quickly. Eleanor walked until she had no strength left. Her feet ached, her stomach growled, and the kitten mewed softly, also hungry. She saw an abandoned barn at the back of another property and decided to take shelter there. It wasn't much, but it was better than the rain that was starting to fall. Inside the barn, she found some dry hay bales. She made an improvised bed, shared the last crackers she had in her bag with the kitten, and lay down, wrapped in the only coat she owned. The kitten nestled against her neck, purring softly. "Tomorrow will be better," she whispered to the little animal. "It has to be." But she didn't know that this barn belonged precisely to Willow Creek Ranch, at the back of the main property. And she didn't know that Silas Sterling had the habit of walking the entire ranch every early morning, unable to sleep, inspecting every corner as if searching for something he had lost. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of voices. She lay still, holding the kitten, trying to listen. There were 2 men talking near the barn. "The boss is more closed off than usual," said a deep voice. "Yesterday he didn't even want dinner, just kept staring out the window." "That man is going to end up going crazy alone in that house," replied another voice. "It's been 5 years since the boss's wife Clara left, and he doesn't get any better." "And did you see the poor old lady who came asking for help yesterday?" continued the first. "You could see she had nowhere to go, but the boss sent her away. It's no use trying to talk to him, George. You've known Silas longer than I have. After the boss's wife left, he closed off his heart." Eleanor then understood where she was. She had taken shelter on the property of the very man who had rejected her. She needed to get out of there before being discovered. She waited for the men to move away, picked up the kitten and her bag and left the barn as quietly as possible. But the kitten, curious as cats are, jumped from her arms and ran toward a nearby chicken coop. Eleanor went after it, trying to catch it without making a sound. That's when she bumped into an old can that fell with a crash. "Who's there?" shouted George, the older employee. Eleanor froze. There was no escape. George appeared around the corner of the chicken coop and saw her there, with the kitten finally back in her arms, looking like a child caught doing something wrong. "Mom," began George, recognizing her. "Did you sleep here?" "I'm sorry," Eleanor said quickly. "I had nowhere to sleep last night. I saw the abandoned barn and thought, I'm sorry, I'm leaving now." George was a man of nearly 60, with deep wrinkles around his eyes and calloused hands from a lifetime of working the land. He looked at Eleanor and saw his own mother, who had passed 3 years prior. He felt something tighten in his chest. "Have you eaten anything?" he asked more gently. "I have some crackers," lied Eleanor, not wanting pity. "Wait here," said George. "Don't leave. I'll get you something to eat." Before Eleanor could protest, he had already headed toward the workers' house. He returned 10 minutes later with a cloth bundle containing bread, cheese, and a mug of warm milk. "Eat," he said, "and don't worry. I won't tell the boss you're here, but I also can't let you stay in the barn. If he finds out, he'll fire me." "I understand," said Eleanor, taking the food with trembling hands. "Thank you for your kindness. I'll eat and be on my way." "Where will you go?" asked George, worried. "I'll find a way," she replied without much conviction. George sighed. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't just let her leave without help. "Look," he said quietly, "today is Sunday. The boss only comes to do his rounds of the ranch on Monday morning. You can stay in the barn one more day, but tomorrow morning you need to leave before he arrives. I'll bring more food this afternoon." Eleanor wanted to refuse, but she was too tired. She accepted with a nod and ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last meal in the world. Meanwhile, in the main house, Silas Sterling woke from another restless night. He passed through the empty kitchen, made coffee that was too strong, burned the toast, and ate standing up, looking out the window at the vastness of the ranch. All of it was his. 400 hectares of good land, quality cattle, profitable crops. But what was the point if he came home every night to a lifeless house? He thought of the woman from yesterday. Eleanor, she had said. There was something in her eyes that bothered him. It wasn't desperation, it was wounded dignity, as if she had been through worse things and still held her head high. He shook his head, pushing the thoughts away. It wasn't his problem. Sunday passed slowly. Silas tried to read but couldn't. He tried to watch television but gave up. He walked around the ranch, checked fences that didn't need checking, counted cattle that had already been counted, anything to fill the emptiness. When the afternoon came, he saw George walking toward the back of the ranch with a basket. She thought it was odd, but didn't dwell on it. George had lived on the ranch for 20 years. He was trustworthy. Out back, Eleanor received the food George brought. Still warm soup, more bread, some fruit, even a small can of food for the kitten. "You really have to leave early tomorrow morning," George warned. "The boss gets here around 7. Be gone before 6. "I'll leave," promised Eleanor, "and thank you from the bottom of my heart. We don't encounter true kindness every day." "You remind me of my mother," said George, moved. "She was strong like that too. She had that same dignity. I couldn't look at you and just turn away." That night, Eleanor slept a little better with a full stomach and the kitten warming her feet. She dreamed of the house where she raised her children, of the Sunday cookouts, of the birthday parties. She dreamed of the husband who had passed 10 years before, taken by a heart problem. She dreamed of the days when she was still loved. She woke before sunrise. She arranged the hay as it was, erased all signs she had slept there, and began walking toward the road. But before leaving, she had an impulse. She had learned to make straw braids from her mother, decades ago. She took a few strands of dry hay and braided a small decoration, delicate and pretty. She hung it on the barn door, a silent gift of gratitude. When Silas arrived for his morning rounds, he was in a bad mood. He had slept even worse than usual, tormented by confused dreams of Clara, of loneliness, of that woman with sad eyes who had appeared at the gate. He went to check the old barn, as he always did. That's when he saw the straw braid hanging on the door. He stopped, confused. That wasn't there before. It was delicate, made with skill. He touched the braid, feeling its texture. There was something in that anonymous gesture that touched him strangely. "George," he called. The employee appeared, visibly nervous. "Yes, boss?" "Did you see who hung this here?" George looked at the braid and immediately knew who had made it. But lying to the boss was something he had never done in 20 years. "It was the lady from yesterday," he admitted. "She slept here in the barn. I let her, boss. I know I shouldn't have, but—" "She slept here?" interrupted Silas, his voice tense. "Just last night, boss. I gave her a little food and sent her away early this morning. It won't happen again." Silas fell silent, looking at the braid on the door. Part of him wanted to be angry at George for disobeying, but the other part, the part he had been trying to smother for 5 years, felt something different. Gratitude? Admiration? He couldn't name it. "Where did she go?" he asked, surprising himself. "I don't know, boss." "She didn't say." Silas nodded and went back to the house, taking the braid with him. He hung it in the kitchen, on the same nail where Clara used to hang the keys. He stared at that small object for a long time, not understanding why it affected him so much. The days passed. Silas tried to return to his routine, but the straw braid in the kitchen was a constant reminder. George, for his part, couldn't stop thinking about Eleanor. Was she okay? Had she found shelter? Food? It was George's wife, Martha, who brought the news. She worked part-time at a local bakery in the nearby small town and knew everyone. "George," she said one night, worried, "do you remember that lady you helped, Eleanor?" "I remember," he said. "Why?" "She's sleeping under the bridge at the edge of town," Martha told him. "Mrs. Gable told me. She said she saw her there yesterday, with a kitten, shivering from the cold. She seems to be sick." George felt his heart tighten. He looked at his wife, torn between his conscience and the fear of losing his job. "I need to tell the boss," he finally said. "You'll lose your job," Martha warned. "You know Silas. He won't like being pressured. But if she dies under that bridge and I do nothing, how will I sleep at night?" replied George. The next morning he knocked on the door of the main house. Silas received him in the kitchen, where the straw braid still hung. "Boss, I need to speak with you," began George. "Go on." "It's about Mrs. Eleanor. She's sleeping under the bridge at the edge of town. My wife saw her. She's sick." Silas was silent for a long moment. His eyes went to the braid on the wall, then back to George. "And why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice controlled. "Because you're a good man, boss," said George with courage. "I've worked here for 20 years. I've seen you help neighbors in trouble. I've seen you loan money to employees who needed it. I know that after the mistress Clara left you changed, but I don't believe you've changed that much." "George," said Silas, his voice dangerously low, "you're meddling where you shouldn't." "I am, boss," agreed George, "and if you want to fire me for it, I understand. But before you do, I wanted you to think about one thing. That lady didn't ask for charity. She offered work in exchange for a roof, and you know as well as I do that the back house has been empty since the last caretaker retired. She could stay there, work, and nobody would bother anybody." Silas looked at the employee with anger, but also with something that could be respect. George had the courage to stand up to him, something no one else did. "Leave," he said. "I need to think." George left, certain he would be fired, but at least his conscience would be clean. Silas was left alone in the kitchen, looking at the straw braid. He thought of Clara, of how she always accused him of being cold, distant, incapable of connecting with people. He thought of how she cried the day she left, saying he had become a hard, bitter version of himself. He thought of all these years of loneliness, convinced it was better this way, that he needed no one. But the truth, which he never admitted out loud, was that he was tired. Tired of coming home to an empty house, tired of eating alone, tired of waking in the dead of night and wandering the ranch like a ghost, tired of being a man of stone. He grabbed the truck keys and left. The bridge was 15 kilometers from the ranch. When he got there, he saw Eleanor huddled under the concrete structure, the kitten nestled against her. She was trembling even though it was noon, which meant the fever was high. He got out of the truck and approached. Eleanor opened her eyes at the sound of footsteps. When she saw who it was, she tried to get up, but had no strength. "Mr. Silas," she said, her voice hoarse, "you don't need to worry. I'll leave here soon." "You're sick," he said, surprising himself with the concern in his own voice. "I'll get better," insisted Eleanor. "I just need to rest a little." "Don't be stubborn," said Silas, kneeling beside her. "I'm taking you to the hospital." "No," Eleanor refused firmly. "I've been through hospitals. I've been through assisted living facilities. I'd rather stay here with my dignity than be treated as just another number." Silas looked into her eyes and saw something he recognized: wounded pride, but not broken. He understood then that offering charity to this woman would be an insult. "Then come work for me," he said, the words out before he could think better of it. "The caretaker's house is empty. You can live there. In return, help with the kitchen, the garden, whatever is needed. I'll pay a fair salary in dollars." Eleanor looked at him suspiciously. "Why did you change your mind?" "Because I'm a stubborn idiot," admitted Silas, "and because George is right. I need help on the ranch and you need a place. It's a fair trade." "I don't want pity," warned Eleanor. "And I'm not offering it," assured Silas. "I'm offering work. Do you accept or not?" Eleanor looked at the kitten, at the cold bridge at the edge of town, at the man in front of her who tried to seem tough but had tired eyes. She nodded slowly. "I accept, but on one condition. If I can't handle the work, you tell me and I'll leave without complaint." "Agreed," said Silas, extending his hand. She shook it, and that handshake sealed something more than a work agreement. It sealed the beginning of a transformation neither of them expected. Silas helped Eleanor into the pickup truck, grabbed her bag and the kitten. On the way back to the ranch, neither of them spoke much. Eleanor was too weak and Silas was processing what he had just done. When they arrived, George was fixing a fence and nearly fell over when he saw the pickup truck stopping with Eleanor inside. Silas got out and called him. "George, prepare the foreman's house," he ordered. "Mrs. Eleanor will stay there, and call Martha to help take care of her until she gets better." George smiled, moved. "Yes, boss." In the following days, Martha cared for Eleanor as if she were family. She made teas, soups, brought home remedies. The fever passed, and little by little Eleanor regained her strength. The kitten, named Oscar, explored the property with curiosity. When she was finally able to get up, Eleanor went to get to know her new home better. The foreman's house was simple but cozy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room. It was a bit dusty, but nothing a good cleaning couldn't fix. "I can start working tomorrow," she told Martha. "You're still recovering," the other woman warned. "I'm not going to sit here with my arms crossed," insisted Eleanor. "I made a deal and I'll keep it." The next day, before sunrise, Eleanor was already up. She cleaned the foreman's house completely, then went to the main house. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. She went in and found Silas sleeping in the living room armchair, still dressed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table. She stood still, watching. That man carried as much pain as she did. She could see it in the tired lines of his face, in the way even asleep he seemed tense. Without making a sound, she took a blanket and covered him. Then she went to the kitchen. When Silas woke up, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled his senses. He got up confused, his head aching. He went to the kitchen and found Eleanor preparing breakfast. "Good morning," she said simply. "You shouldn't be working yet," he said, still sleepy. "I'm fine now," Eleanor assured him. "And we agreed I would work." Silas sat at the table and she served him. Hot coffee, fresh bread, scrambled eggs, fruit. It was the first time in 5 years he had eaten a real breakfast in his own home. "You know how to cook," he commented, genuinely impressed. "I raised 4 children," said Eleanor. "If I didn't know how, they would have gone hungry." "4 children," repeated Silas, "and none of them could help you." Eleanor's expression hardened a little. "They had their own lives," she said diplomatically. Silas understood there was a painful story there, but didn't press. He ate in silence, and for the first time in years, the silence in the house didn't feel oppressive. In the days that followed, a routine began to form. Eleanor woke up early, made coffee, tended to the vegetable garden that had been abandoned for years, fed the chickens, made the meals. Silas tried to keep his distance, but it was impossible not to notice the changes. The house was clean. There were flowers on the tables. The meals tasted like home. One afternoon, while Eleanor was pruning rose bushes that had gone wild, Silas stopped to watch her work. "You like plants," he commented. "I always have," answered Eleanor, without stopping her pruning. "I had a beautiful garden at my old house, roses, jasmine, hydrangeas, but when I went to the assisted living facility, everything died. No one took care of it." "What happened to your house?" Eleanor stopped pruning and looked at the horizon. "My children sold it. They said they needed the money to pay for the assisted living facility. I found out later that wasn't true. They split the money among themselves and put me in the cheapest assisted living facility they could find." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Silas felt anger toward people he didn't even know. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. "Why did you bring me here?" Silas thought carefully before answering. "Because I saw in you something I recognized in myself," he admitted. "Someone who was giving up but refused to fall." "And what made you give up?" asked Eleanor gently. Silas was silent for a long moment. Then, for the first time in 5 years, he told the whole story. "My wife Clara left me 5 years ago. She walked out on a Tuesday morning with 2 suitcases and a letter. In the letter, she said she loved me very much, but that I was more married to the ranch than to her. She said she tried to reach me thousands of times, but I was always too busy, too tired, too distant. And she was right. I worked from before sunrise until after dark. Dinners were eaten in silence. Conversations were about bills and ranch problems. I thought I was building a future for us, but I was only building a prison." Eleanor listened in silence, pruning slowly. "Did you try to find her?" she asked. "Yes," admitted Silas. "But she didn't want to see me. She sent a lawyer to handle the divorce. We split everything, she took half, I kept the ranch. And since then I've lived here alone, convinced it was better this way. Until a stubborn lady showed up at my gate holding a kitten and forced me to remember I'm still human." Eleanor smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Sometimes God puts certain people in our path just when we need them most," she said. "I don't know if I believe in fate, but I believe in second chances." "And you?" asked Silas. "Are you going to tell me your full story?" Eleanor went back to pruning, organizing her thoughts. "I was married for 40 years to Arthur. He was a bus driver. A good man, hard-working, kind. We had 4 children, Howard, Diana, Miles, and Jessica. I took care of the house, raised the children, did sewing jobs to help with the bills. It was a simple life, but it was ours." She paused, her voice growing heavier. "Arthur passed 10 years ago. His heart stopped one morning without warning. He was having coffee, complained of a pain in his chest and fell. When the ambulance arrived, it was too late. "I'm sorry," said Silas sincerely. "After he passed, I realized I depended too much on my children," Eleanor continued. "I thought since I'd taken care of them their whole lives, they'd take care of me in my old age. At first they did. They called, visited, took me out for lunch. But little by little, the calls became less frequent. The visits dwindled. I discovered I was a burden." Her voice held no self-pity, only factual sadness. "One day, Howard, my oldest son, came with an idea. He said they'd found a very good assisted living facility, with activities, other people my age, medical care. He said it would be better for me than being alone at home. I believed him. I signed the papers he put in front of me. Only later did I discover I'd also signed the sale of my house." "They tricked you," said Silas, indignant. "Yes," confirmed Eleanor. "The facility was horrible. Bad food, grumpy staff, dirty rooms. I spent 6 months there, sadder each day. I called my children asking to leave, but they always had excuses. Until one day, I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. I gathered my few things and left. I found Oscar on the road, abandoned like me, and we went on together." "You are strong," said Silas with admiration. "I'm not strong," corrected Eleanor. "I'm just too stubborn to give up." That conversation marked a change. Silas began to see Eleanor not as an employee but as a person, someone with a history, with pain, with strength, and Eleanor began to see Silas not as a harsh boss, but as a broken man trying to rebuild himself. The weeks passed, and the ranch began to change. Not physically, but in essence, there was life again. George noticed that the boss smiled from time to time. Martha commented that Mrs. Eleanor had a way with plants, and the garden that was dead now bloomed. Even the other employees noticed the atmosphere was lighter. One evening, Silas was on the porch of the main house when Eleanor passed by carrying a basket of clean laundry. "Mrs. Eleanor," he called, "come have some coffee." She hesitated. "I don't want to be a bother, Mr. Silas." "You're not a bother," he assured her. "Please." Eleanor set the basket aside and stepped up onto the porch. Silas poured coffee, and the two sat in a comfortable silence, looking at the stars. "You know what I miss the most?" said Eleanor suddenly. "Having someone to talk to at the end of the day. Arthur and I did that every night. We'd sit on the porch, have coffee, talk about the day, silly things most of the time, but it was our time." "Clara and I never did that," admitted Silas. "I was always too busy. Now I understand what I missed." "It's never too late to learn," said Eleanor. "Clara is gone, but that doesn't mean you have to be alone forever." "And you?" asked Silas. "Don't you think about starting over?" Eleanor laughed, a soft sound. "At 68? I think my time for romance has passed." "Age is just a number," said Silas. "My grandmother remarried at 73, lived another 15 happy years." "Your grandmother was lucky," said Eleanor. "But I'm fine like this. I have a roof, food, work I enjoy. It's more than I had a month ago." They kept talking until late, and that became a routine. Every night after dinner, the two would meet on the porch for coffee and conversation. Sometimes they talked about the past, sometimes about the present, sometimes they just enjoyed the silence. It was on one of those nights that the trouble began. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. A letter arrived. The mailman delivered it directly into Eleanor's hands on a Thursday morning. She looked at the envelope, and her face lost its color. It was from the law office her children had used to sell her house. With trembling hands, she opened it. The letter stated that her children were suing her for abandonment of responsibilities. They claimed she had fled the assisted living facility, causing them financial loss since they had paid 6 months in advance. They demanded she return immediately or repay the amount. Eleanor sat down in the kitchen, the letter shaking in her hands. She didn't have the money to pay. She had barely started receiving a salary from the ranch, and going back to the assisted living facility meant going back to hell. Silas found her like that, pale and trembling. He took the letter from her hands and read it. "This is absurd," he said, furious. "They can't do this." "They can," said Eleanor, her voice fragile. "I signed the papers. I have to go back or pay." "You will do neither," declared Silas. "I'll call my lawyer." "I can't ask that of you," protested Eleanor. "You're not asking," said Silas firmly. "I'm offering. No one is going to force you back to that place." He called his lawyer, Dr. Lawrence, and scheduled a meeting for the next day. That night, Eleanor could barely sleep. Oscar sensed her anguish and stayed close to her, purring softly. The next morning, Silas and Eleanor went together to the lawyer's office in town. Dr. Lawrence was a man in his early 50s, serious but competent. She read the letter and the copies of the documents Eleanor had kept. "It's a complicated situation," he admitted. "You signed a contract for a minimum 1-year stay at the assisted living facility. By leaving early, you broke the contract." "But the conditions at the facility weren't as promised," argued Eleanor. "They deceived me." "We would need to prove that," said Dr. Lawrence. "Do you have photos, witnesses, any documentation of the inadequate conditions?" Eleanor shook her head, discouraged. "I didn't think to document it. I just wanted to get out of there." Dr. Lawrence looked at Silas. "Are you willing to bear the costs of a legal battle? Because it could take months and get expensive." "Whatever it takes," said Silas without hesitation. Eleanor looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Silas, I can't accept this." "You can and you will," he said. "No one deserves to be blackmailed by their own children." They left the office with a plan. Dr. Lawrence would send a response to Eleanor's children, explaining that she was employed, had a fixed residence and had no intention of returning to the assisted living facility. He would offer to negotiate the amount due, but would make it clear they were prepared to fight in court if necessary. On the way back to the ranch, Eleanor was silent. Silas could sense the tension in her shoulders. "Everything will be all right," he said. "How can you be so sure?" she asked. "Because I won't let them take you," said Silas, surprising himself with his own vehemence. "How you've become part of this ranch, part of this place, and I protect what's mine." Eleanor looked at him and saw something that frightened and comforted her at the same time. Determination. That man was willing to fight for her, even without fully understanding why. The following days were tense. The response from Eleanor's children came quickly and aggressively. They would not accept negotiation. They wanted the full amount or her back in the assisted living facility. They threatened to accuse her of abandoning a dependent, claiming she was not mentally fit to make decisions on her own. That enraged Silas in a way he hadn't felt in years. "They're going to try to prove you're incompetent?" he said, incredulous. "You who run this house better than anyone I've ever seen." "They'll do whatever it takes to get the money," said Eleanor sadly. "And if they succeed in having me declared incompetent, they'll get access to my widow's pension too." Silas understood then. It wasn't about the facility. It was about money. It always had been. Dr. Lawrence advised them to gather witnesses to Eleanor's competence. George and Martha promptly offered. The town doctor, Dr. Bennett, who had examined Eleanor when she recovered from her fever, also agreed to testify. But before they could organize their defense, Eleanor's children showed up at the ranch. It was a Saturday morning. Eleanor was in the garden watering the plants when she saw the car stop at the gate. 3 people got out, 2 men and a woman. She recognized them immediately. Howard, Miles, and Diana, her children. Her heart stopped. Her hands began to tremble. Oscar, who was nearby, sensed her fear and hid behind her legs. "Mother," said Howard, the eldest, with a false tone of concern, "we finally found you. We were so worried." "You weren't," said Eleanor, finding her voice. "If you were, you would have looked for me sooner." "We did look," lied Diana. "We went to the facility and they said you had run away. We were desperate." "Then why was the first thing you did to send a lawyer's letter threatening me?" asked Eleanor, firmer now. Miles, the youngest, had the decency to look ashamed, but Howard maintained the facade. "Mother, be reasonable," he said. "You can't live like this, working like a servant on a stranger's ranch. There's no dignity in that." "I have more dignity here than I had in the facility you stuck me in," retorted Eleanor. That's when Silas appeared. He had heard voices and came to investigate. He stopped beside Eleanor, a solid and protective presence. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are our mother's children," said Howard with disdain, "and you must be the rancher taking advantage of a vulnerable lady." Silas stepped forward, but Eleanor held him by the arm. "No," she said quietly. "They don't deserve it." "You're coming with us now," ordered Howard. "We've wasted enough time on this nonsense." "I'm not going," said Eleanor clearly. "I won't go back to that place and I won't go back with you." "You have no choice," said Diana. "We have a court order. We'll force you to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. If they prove you're not mentally competent, we'll assume guardianship." Silas felt the anger boil. "Get off my property," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now." "Or what?" challenged Howard. "You'll throw us out. We have legal rights over our mother." "No, you don't," said a voice behind them. Everyone turned. Dr. Lawrence was there with a folder of documents. "Dr. Lawrence," said Silas, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I received an anonymous call saying Mrs. Eleanor's children were coming here," explained the lawyer. "I thought I'd better come too." He opened the folder and took out some documents. "Gentlemen," he said to Eleanor's children, "I have just filed a reverse interdiction action. We are asking the court to recognize Mrs. Eleanor's full mental capacity and block any attempt to declare her incompetent." "You can't do that," stammered Howard. "We can, and we have," said Dr. Lawrence calmly. "Furthermore, we are preparing a lawsuit for misappropriation related to the sale of Mrs. Eleanor's house. The documents you had her sign are being analyzed. There are indications of coercion." Diana paled. Miles looked at his siblings in panic. Howard tried to maintain his composure. "This is ridiculous," he said. Our mother signed everything of her own free will." "Let me see if I understand," said Eleanor, finally finding her full voice. "You put me in a terrible assisted living facility, sold my house without telling me, divided the money among yourselves, and now you want to force me back into that hell just to get access to my pension. And I'm the incompetent one in this story?" For the first time, Howard's facade cracked. He looked at his mother with something that might have been shame. "Mom, we needed the money," he began. "Don't call me Mom," cut Eleanor. "Mothers are loved, respected, cared for. I was treated like an inconvenient object. You betrayed me, and now you'll have to live with that. If we don't settle this amicably, we'll take it to court," threatened Howard, trying to regain control. "Do that," said Dr. Lawrence, "and be ready for a long and expensive battle, because Mr. Silas Sterling is funding Mrs. Eleanor's entire defense, and he has considerable resources." Howard looked at Silas, reassessing. He saw a determined, wealthy man with connections. He was not an easy opponent. "This isn't over," he said, but without much conviction. "For me it is," said Eleanor. "You are no longer my children. You are just people who share my blood but not my heart. Now get off Mr. Silas's property." The three left, defeated but still resentful. When the car disappeared down the road, Eleanor broke down. All the emotions she had been holding back came to the surface. She cried as she hadn't cried in years. Silas supported her, saying nothing. Sometimes words don't help. Sometimes only presence matters. Martha appeared and helped take Eleanor inside. She made tea, covered her with a blanket, and stayed by her side until the crying stopped. "Did I do the right thing?" asked Eleanor when she could speak. "Renouncing my children." "They renounced you first," said Martha gently. "You just acknowledged the truth." That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had witnessed, about those cruel and greedy children, about Eleanor's courage in facing them, and about the fact that he had placed himself completely in the line of fire for her without a second thought. Why? Why did he care so much? The answer came slowly, frighteningly, because she had become important to him, not as an employee, not as charity, but as a person, as a presence that filled the empty house, as a voice that broke the silence, as someone he didn't want to lose. In the following days, the legal battle began. Dr. Lawrence worked tirelessly. He obtained testimonies from the staff at the assisted living facility about the poor conditions. Photographs, documents. He built a solid case. Eleanor's children, realizing they were going to lose, tried to negotiate. They offered to drop everything if Eleanor signed a document renouncing any future inheritance they might have. "They still think I have something worth taking," Eleanor commented bitterly when Dr. Lawrence told her. "And you do," said the lawyer. "Your pension, for example. If they got guardianship, they would have access to it." "Then draw up the document," Eleanor decided. "I want nothing from them, not ever again." The document was prepared. Eleanor signed it, and so, legally, her ties with her children were severed. She was free, but the freedom tasted of abandonment. Silas found her one night on the porch, looking at the stars with tears in her eyes. "Regrets?" he asked gently. "No," she said, "but it hurts all the same. They are my children. I changed diapers, gave bottles, stayed up nights when they were sick, and they discarded me like trash." "People can be cruel," said Silas. "Even people who are supposed to love us." "Are you talking about Clara?" asked Eleanor. "Perhaps," admitted Silas, "but I'm also talking about myself. I was cruel to her in a different way. Neglect is also cruelty." They were silent for a while. "You know what I've realized," said Eleanor. "Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. George and Martha treat me better than my own children. And you fought for me when my own flesh and blood abandoned me." "You would have done the same for me," said Silas. "Would I?" asked Eleanor, genuinely curious. "You would," confirmed Silas. "You're the kind of person who doesn't leave anyone behind." Eleanor smiled in the dark. "We're making a strange family, aren't we?" "The best I've ever had," admitted Silas, and he realized it was true. The weeks passed, and turned into months. Summer turned to autumn. The trees at the ranch began to turn golden. A routine was established. Eleanor took care of the house, the garden, the chickens. Silas took care of the crops, the cattle, the business. And every night without fail they met on the porch for coffee and conversation. One day George had an idea. "Boss," he said, "my wife wants to throw a birthday party for Mrs. Eleanor next month. She's turning 70. Can we use the main house hall?" Silas thought. The main house hall hadn't been used in 5 years, not since Clara's birthday, which ended in a fight. Since then, the door had been locked. "You can," he said, surprising himself. "I'll help clean it." When Martha told Eleanor the plan, she was moved. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We want to," insisted Martha. "You deserve to be celebrated." On the birthday, the hall was transformed. George and Silas had cleaned everything. Martha had decorated with flowers from the garden that Eleanor cultivated, and the ranch hands had pooled their money to buy a large cake. When Eleanor walked in and saw it all, she began to cry. "Why are you all doing this for me?" she asked, moved. "Because you're special," said Martha. "Because you take care of all of us. Because you brought life back to this ranch. The party was simple, but joyful. There was music, dancing, good food. Silas, who never danced, danced with Eleanor, and when he spun her around, he saw genuine joy in her eyes, joy that he had helped create. At the end of the night, when everyone had already left, Silas and Eleanor were alone in the hall. "Thank you," she said, "for the last few months, for giving me a home, for giving me a family." "The thanks are mine," said Silas. "You reminded me how it feels to be alive, how it feels to have a real home." "Mr. Silas," said Eleanor hesitantly, "may I ask you something?" "Anything. Why did you never try to look for Clara again, after you changed, after you learned to open up?" Silas was silent for a long time. "Because some doors once closed should remain closed," he said finally. "Clara deserves to be happy, and I hurt her too much. It wouldn't be fair to try to go back just because I finally learned the lessons I should have learned before." "But what if she changed too? What if she also realized things?" "Then she would look for me," said Silas. "But she didn't, and that's okay. Sometimes the end of something sad is the beginning of something new." Eleanor looked at him with understanding. "And do you think you've found that something new?" Silas looked around the hall, thought of the house that now had life, the garden that was blooming, the nightly conversations that filled the loneliness. "I think so," he said. "Not in the way I imagined, but I found it." Months passed. Autumn turned to winter. The ranch went through difficulties, a bad harvest, pest problems, employees who quit. Silas was stressed, falling back into old habits of working too much and talking too little. Eleanor noticed. One night, when he came home late again, skipping dinner, she waited for him on the porch. "You're doing it again," she said without preamble. "Doing what?" asked Silas, tired, hiding in work, pulling away from people, closing yourself off. "I have problems to solve," he said, defensive. "There will always be problems," said Eleanor, "but you can't let the problems consume you. That's what made you lose Clara. Don't lose yourself again." Silas was about to argue, but stopped. He looked at that woman who, in less than a year, had become the conscience he didn't know he needed. "You're right," he admitted, sitting down heavily. "I'm falling into the same patterns." "Then stop," said Eleanor simply. "The problems will be there tomorrow. But life is happening now, don't miss it." It was a turning point. Silas began to delegate more, to trust the employees, to leave work at reasonable hours. He returned to the nightly conversations on the porch. He returned to living, and it was during one of those conversations that she appeared. Clara. It was a Saturday night. Silas and Eleanor were on the porch when they saw a car stop at the gate. A woman got out. Even in the dim light, Silas recognized her immediately. "Clara?" he whispered, shocked. Eleanor looked at the woman approaching and then at Silas. She saw the shock, the confusion, and something else she couldn't identify. "Do you want me to leave?" she asked quietly. "No," said Silas quickly. "Stay." Please. Clara climbed the porch steps. She was thinner, with more lines around her eyes, but still beautiful. Silas, she said, her voice hesitant, I hope you don't mind that I showed up like this. No, said Silas, finding his voice. I don't mind. Clara, this is Eleanor Vance. She lives and works here. Clara looked at Eleanor with curiosity. Nice to meet you, she said. The pleasure is mine, replied Eleanor politely. I'll let you two talk, she said, standing up. You don't have to, said Clara quickly. Actually, what I came to say can be said in front of anyone. She took a deep breath. Silas, I came to apologize. For the last 5 years. For leaving without giving you a chance to change. For being a coward. Silas looked at her, confused. You weren't a coward. I was a terrible husband. You were, agreed Clara with a sad smile. But I was also a terrible wife. I expected you to guess what I needed instead of saying it clearly. I held on to resentments instead of talking, and when I finally couldn't take it anymore, I ran away instead of fighting. Why are you saying this now? Asked Silas. Clara sighed. Because I spent 5 years in therapy. Because I rebuilt my life. Because I found peace. And because I realized I left things unresolved between us. I didn't come to ask to get back together. I came to ask for forgiveness and to offer mine. Eleanor watched in silence, seeing the scene unfold. You have my forgiveness, said Silas softly. You always have. And you're right. We both made mistakes. You're different, observed Clara. More at ease. I changed, said Silas. I learned the lessons I should have learned a long time ago. Clara looked at Eleanor again, this time with understanding. Did she teach you? Silas looked at Eleanor and their eyes met. Her and many other people, he said. But yes, she was important in that process. Clara smiled genuinely. Then I have to thank her too. The Silas I left was losing himself in the darkness. The Silas I see now has found the light. She stood up. I only came for this. I thought I deserved a proper closure, and now that I have it, I can really move on. Are you happy? Asked Silas. I am, said Clara. I met someone. He's kind, present, he listens to me. We're engaged. Silas felt something tighten, but it wasn't jealousy. It was relief. I'm happy for you, he said sincerely. And you? Asked Clara. Have you found someone too? Silas looked at Eleanor, who was carefully looking at the horizon, giving them privacy. I found peace, he said, and that's more than I hoped for. Clara stepped down from the porch, said goodbye, and left. When the car disappeared, Silas and Eleanor stood in silence. She seemed like a good person, commented Eleanor finally. She is, agreed Silas. We just weren't good for each other. And that's okay, said Eleanor. Not every love needs to last forever to be important. You're wise, said Silas. I'm not wise, corrected Eleanor. I'm just old. It's different. Silas laughed, and the tension that had arrived with Clara finally dissipated. But Clara's visit planted a seed. Silas began to think about the future, about what he wanted from the life he had left, about who he wanted by his side. He looked at Eleanor differently now. He saw how she lit up the room when she entered, how her laugh made him smile, how her wise words guided him, how her presence made the house a home. And he was startled to realize he had developed feelings for her, not the feverish feelings of youth, but something deeper, more solid, companionship, respect, genuine affection, and something that could perhaps be love. But she was 20 years older than him. She had suffered so much. Would it be fair to declare feelings that could complicate the peace she had finally found? He decided to do nothing, to keep things as they were, but the heart has its own ideas. It was during the harshest winter the ranch had ever seen that everything changed. The flu swept through the region. Many fell ill, including George and Martha. Silas and Eleanor worked double to care for everyone, sleepless nights, exhausting days. But they did it together, side by side. And it was on one of those nights, when both were too exhausted to sleep, that they found themselves alone in the main house's kitchen. We're getting too old for this, commented Eleanor, trying to make a joke. Speak for yourself, teased Silas. I'm still young. Eleanor laughed, but the laugh turned into a cough, a strong, prolonged cough. You're getting sick too, Silas noticed, worried. Just tired, Eleanor lied. But she wasn't. The next day she had a high fever. Silas took her to the main house, put her in the best guest bed, and cared for her personally. It was 3 days of fever. 3 days where Silas barely slept, staying by her side, changing compresses, making tea, making sure she was breathing. And it was during the early hours when the fever finally broke that Eleanor opened her eyes and saw him sitting by the bed, his head resting on the edge, sleeping uncomfortably. Silas, she called softly. He woke with a start. You're better, he said, relieved. The fever is gone. You took care of me, said Eleanor, moved. Of course I did, said Silas. You're important to me. Why? Asked Eleanor. Why am I important? Silas looked at her and saw fragility and hope in her tired eyes. He decided to risk it. Because when you arrived here, I was dead inside, he said honestly. Functioning but not living. And you brought me back. You filled this house with life, filled me with life. And somewhere in the process, without realizing it, I fell in love with you. Eleanor fell silent, eyes wide. I know I'm younger, Silas continued quickly. I know our situation is complicated. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed you to know. You fell in love with me? Asked Eleanor, incredulous. Yes, confirmed Silas. Not in the dramatic way of the movies, but in the quiet way of someone who realizes they don't want to spend another day without the other person's presence. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. Me too, she whispered. I fell in love with you too, but I was afraid to admit it. I'm 20 years older. I'm an old woman, worn out, abandoned by my own children. You are the strongest woman I know, corrected Silas, and age is just a number. My grandmother got married at 73, remember? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Eleanor laughed through her tears. This is crazy, she said. Maybe, agreed Silas, but it's the best kind of crazy in my life. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. You don't have to decide anything now, he said. I just wanted you to know that if you ever want something more, I'm here. What if I want it now? Asked Eleanor timidly. Silas smiled, that smile she had learned to love. Then I would be very happy. They stayed like that, holding hands, until Eleanor fell asleep. Silas remained by her side, watching over her sleep, protecting her as he promised to do. In the following days, as Eleanor recovered, they talked about fears, about hopes, about the future. They decided to take it slow, without rushing. There was no point in hurrying when they had already lived so much. George and Martha also recovered from the flu and soon noticed the change in the air. The boss was different. Mrs. Eleanor was different. There was a softness between them that hadn't existed before. I think they finally found each other, Martha commented to George. About time, said George, smiling. I just hope they're happy. And they were. In a quiet way, without drama, but deep. They walked together around the ranch in the afternoons. They cooked together. They read together. And every night, without fail, they met on the porch for coffee and conversation. But life, as always, had other plans. One day a woman appeared at the ranch, young, around 40, with a baby in her arms. I'm looking for Eleanor Vance, she said. Eleanor was called. She looked at the woman without recognition. I'm Eleanor. My name is Samantha, said the woman. I'm Jessica's daughter. Eleanor paled. Jessica was her youngest daughter, the one she had the least contact with. A grandchild? She asked, emotional. Yes, confirmed Samantha. And this is your great-granddaughter, Lily. Eleanor looked at the baby, feeling her heart tighten. Why did you come here? Samantha sighed. Because my mother told me what my uncles and she did, about the assisted living facility, about the house, about everything, and I was ashamed. so very ashamed. "Your mother knew?" asked Eleanor, hurt. "She knew," admitted Samantha, "but she was the weakest among the siblings. She let them make the decisions. But when she found out you had run away, that you almost went without, she was devastated. She tried to look for you, but my uncles hid the information. And now? Now she sent me to come. She is sick, Grandma. Cancer. She doesn't have long. And before she goes, she wants to see you. She wants to ask for forgiveness." Eleanor fell silent, processing. Silas appeared beside her, offering silent support. "Where is she?" "At the hospital in the state capital," said Samantha. "I can take you there." Eleanor looked at Silas. "Go," he said gently. "You need to have that closure." "Will you come with me?" she asked. "If you want me to go, I will," promised Silas. They made the trip the next day. The hospital was large, impersonal. Jessica was in a small room, thin, pale, connected to several machines. When she saw her mother, she began to cry. "Mother," she said, her voice weak, "forgive me. Please, forgive me." Eleanor approached the bed. She looked at the daughter she had helped raise, the daughter who had betrayed her. She felt anger, hurt, but also compassion. "What do you have?" she asked. "Pancreatic cancer," said Jessica. "Advanced stage. The doctors give me a few months." "And your brothers?" asked Eleanor. "Howard and Diana don't want to speak to me," said Jessica. "When I found out I was sick and had no money for treatment, I asked for help. They refused. They said I should have saved money from the sale of your house. The irony was not lost on anyone." "And Miles?" "Miles is trying to help," said Jessica. "But he has his own family. He doesn't have much." Eleanor sighed. "And what do you want from me?" "Forgiveness," said Jessica simply. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I was a coward. But I don't want to die knowing I completely destroyed our relationship." Eleanor looked at her daughter, at Silas who was nearby, at Samantha holding the baby. "You are right," Eleanor finally said. "You were a coward. You were weak. You abandoned me when I needed you most, and that hurts. It will always hurt." Jessica lowered her head, crying. "But," Eleanor continued, "you are my daughter, and even though you hurt me, I can't hate you. I can't let you die without peace." She took Jessica's hand. "I forgive you," she said. "I haven't forgotten. I won't forget. But I forgive you." Jessica held her mother's hand and cried. They were tears of relief, of shame, of gratitude. In the following months, Eleanor visited Jessica regularly. Silas always went along, offering silent support. Samantha and Lily became constant presences at the ranch, and Eleanor finally had blood family who loved her back. Jessica worsened quickly. In her final days, she was lucid enough to speak. "Mother," she said one afternoon, "thank you for not giving up on me." "I would never give up," said Eleanor. "Even when it hurts, a mother doesn't give up on her child." "Howard and Diana will regret it one day," said Jessica. "When they are old and alone, they will understand what they lost." "Perhaps," said Eleanor, "but that is their journey, not mine." Jessica passed on a spring morning, holding her mother's hand. It was peaceful, without suffering. Eleanor cried, but they were tears of peace, not bitterness. She had managed to reconcile. She had given and received forgiveness. At the funeral, Howard and Diana appeared. They tried to speak to Eleanor, but she only nodded politely and walked away. There was nothing more to say. Some bridges burned completely. Miles, however, approached. "Mother," he said, ashamed, "I know I have no right to speak to you after everything." "Then don't," said Eleanor, not cruelly, but firmly. "Jessica had the courage to ask for forgiveness, and I gave it. You and your siblings chose money over family. Now live with that choice." "I'm sorry," said Miles, and he seemed sincere. "So am I," said Eleanor. "I'm sorry my children became people I don't recognize." She returned to Willow Creek Ranch with Silas, Samantha, and Lily, and found a home waiting. George and Martha had prepared dinner. Other employees came to offer their condolences. The entire ranch had become family. That night on the porch, Eleanor was quiet. "Thinking about her?" asked Silas. "Yes," admitted Eleanor. and about how strange life is. I lost 4 children, but I gained an entire family." "Samantha is still your family," reminded Silas. "And Lily." "True," agreed Eleanor. "And you, George, Martha, this entire ranch." "Then you didn't lose everything," said Silas. "No," agreed Eleanor. "I lost what was fragile and gained what is strong." A year passed since Jessica had left. Samantha and Lily visited regularly. The ranch prospered. Eleanor and Silas were companions in everything. It was on a Saturday afternoon that Silas asked the question. "Eleanor," he said, "can we talk?" "We always can," she said, drying her hands on her apron. He led her to the porch where it all began, where they had their first real conversation, where they built their friendship and then their love. "I know our situation is unusual," he began. "I know people might judge. I know you are 20 years older than me, but I also know I am happier with you than I have ever been with anyone." Eleanor looked at him, her heart racing. "Silas." "Let me finish," he asked. "I'm not asking for anything you don't want to give. I'm not trying to change what we have, but I wanted to make it formal. I wanted you to be my wife. Not for papers, not for property, but because I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." He took a box from his pocket. Inside a simple gold ring. "Marry me?" Eleanor looked at the ring, at the man in front of her, at the ranch that had become her home. "I'm old," she said. "I'm getting there too," replied Silas. "People will talk." "Let them. You might regret it." "Impossible." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I'll marry you." Silas placed the ring on her finger and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise and hope. They married in a small ceremony at the ranch itself. Samantha was Eleanor's matron of honor. George was Silas's best man. Martha cried with emotion. Lily, now a year and a half old, threw flowers. It was simple, but it was perfect. After the ceremony, when the guests had gone, Silas and Eleanor were alone on the porch where it all began. "Mr. Silas," said Eleanor playfully. "Mrs. Eleanor Sterling," corrected Silas, smiling. "Is this going to work?" she asked, vulnerable. "It already is," said Silas. "It's been working for a year and a half." "True," agreed Eleanor. They looked at the ranch bathed in the afternoon sun. The house that was once empty was now a home. The garden that was dead now bloomed. The people who were alone now had family. "You know what I thought when I first saw you at the gate?" asked Silas. "What?" "That you were a problem I didn't need," he admitted. "And I was so wrong. You weren't a problem. You were the solution I didn't know I was looking for." "And you," said Eleanor, "were the second chance I didn't think I deserved." "Everyone deserves second chances," said Silas, "and thirds, and as many as it takes." Oscar, the kitten who was now a full-grown cat, jumped into Eleanor's lap, purring. The same cat she was holding when she first appeared at the gate. "He knew," said Eleanor, stroking Oscar. "He knew this would be our home." "Cats are wise," agreed Silas. They stayed there until the sun set, simply existing together. Without hurry, without fear, without regret. Just living, loving being. And on that porch where a hard-hearted rancher once denied shelter to a desperate old woman, now lived a family built not of blood, but of choice, not of obligation, but of love. The ranch that was a prison had become a sanctuary. The man who was dead had been resurrected. The woman who was broken had rebuilt herself. And together, they created something beautiful from their ruins. A few months after the wedding, Silas had an idea. He sought out Eleanor one morning, finding her in the garden as usual. "I have a proposal," he said. "I'm listening," said Eleanor, stopping her watering of the roses. "The back house, where you lived before," began Silas, "is empty again, and I've been thinking, what if we turned it into a temporary shelter?" "Shelter?" asked Eleanor, curious. "For people like you were," explained Silas. "People who need a place to start over, abandoned elderly. People coming out of difficult situations. We could offer temporary housing, help them get back on their feet, find work or solutions." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You would do that? We would do that, corrected Silas. Together. You understand better than I do what these people need. But it would be a lot of work, cautioned Eleanor. We would need structure, rules, time. We have all that, said Silas, and we have you, who is an expert at turning empty places into homes. Eleanor hugged him, moved. Let's do it, she decided. Let's give others the chance you gave me. It took a few months to get everything in order. They renovated the back house, created a small set of rules, established partnerships with community groups in the region, and finally, they opened the doors. The first person to arrive was Mr. Higgins, an 82-year-old man who had been evicted from his apartment because the building was going to be demolished. He had no family, nowhere to go. Eleanor welcomed him with hot coffee and a smile. Welcome, she said. You can stay as long as you need. Mr. Higgins cried with relief. Then came Mrs. Miller, a 75-year-old woman who had fled an assisted living facility where she was mistreated. Her story was so similar to Eleanor's that the two became friends immediately. Then came Frank, a 50-year-old man who had lost everything in a fire and had been sleeping on the street. One by one, people arrived. Some stayed weeks, others months. Eleanor and Silas helped each one get back on their feet, find solutions, rebuild lives. The ranch transformed. It was no longer just a business. It was a community, a place of healing. George and Martha helped. Samantha came on weekends with Lily, now a 3-year-old child, to play with the elderly. Even the ranch workers got involved, each contributing in some way. It was during this time of transformation that Howard, Eleanor's eldest son, appeared. He looked visibly aged, stooped. He knocked on the gate on a Thursday morning. Eleanor saw him and her first impulse was to send him away, but she took a deep breath and went to answer. Howard, she said neutrally. Mother, he said, his voice trembling. I know I have no right to be here. I know I hurt you in unforgivable ways, but I need to speak with you. Speak then, said Eleanor without opening the gate. My wife left me, said Howard. She took everything. The children won't speak to me anymore. I'm alone, broke, with nothing, and I finally understand what I did to you. Eleanor stayed silent. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Howard continued. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just asking for a chance to try and make things right, to show I can be better. What exactly do you want? Asked Eleanor. I don't know, admitted Howard. Maybe just that she listens to me, that she lets me be nearby, that she allows me to try to be the son I should have been. Eleanor looked at him and saw a broken man, the same kind of brokenness she had seen in herself when she arrived at that ranch. I'll think about it, she said finally. Come back in a week. Howard nodded and left. That night, Eleanor talked with Silas. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Part of me wants to help him. Another part remembers everything he did. What does your heart say? Asked Silas. My heart is divided, confessed Eleanor. But I remember when I arrived here, how desperate I was, how you could have sent me away but you didn't, and I think maybe it's time to pass on the grace I received. Then you know what to do, said Silas. When Howard returned, Eleanor made him an offer. You can work here, she said. Not as a son, as an employee. You'll live in the back house with the other people we're helping. You'll work the land. You'll help where needed. You'll have no privileges. And if at any point I feel you're not being sincere, you leave, understood? Howard nodded, emotional. Understood. Thank you, Mother. Don't call me Mother yet, said Eleanor. That title needs to be re-earned. Howard worked. He worked hard. He woke up early, did the hardest tasks, never complained. Little by little, he proved he was truly changed. It took 6 months for Eleanor to have the first real conversation with him. Why did you do it? She asked one afternoon. Why did you betray me that way? Howard took a deep breath. Because I was a coward, he admitted. Because I was selfish. Because I saw you as a burden instead of a privilege, and because I never stopped to think about how you felt, only about how I felt. And now? Now I understand, said Howard. Now that I've been through abandonment, loneliness, rejection, I understand, and I pay the price every day. "You have changed," observed Eleanor. "I'm trying," said Howard. "I'll never erase what I did. But maybe I can do enough good to balance the scales a little." Eleanor nodded. "Keep trying." More months passed. Howard became part of the community. He helped the other residents of the back house, worked well with the employees, respected the boundaries Eleanor set. And slowly, very slowly, Eleanor began to truly forgive. Not forget, she would never forget, but forgive. One day, while they worked together in the garden, Howard spoke. "Can I call you Mother now?" Eleanor looked at him, at the man he had become. He wasn't the son who abandoned her. He was someone new, forged in repentance and hard work. "You may," she said. "But remember, titles come with responsibilities." "I know that," said Howard, "and this time I will honor it." It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. Howard would never be as close as Samantha. The wounds were too deep, but there was peace, and sometimes peace is better than perfection. Years passed. The ranch continued to prosper. The temporary shelter project helped dozens of people. Some stayed, others moved on, but all took with them a piece of the kindness they found there. Eleanor aged gracefully. Silas aged beside her. Oscar, the cat who witnessed everything from the beginning, passed away peacefully at 15, sleeping on Eleanor's lap on a sunny afternoon. "He was a good cat," said Silas, holding Eleanor's hand as she cried. "He was the best," agreed Eleanor. "He saved me as much as you did." They buried Oscar in the garden, under a rose bush he loved. Samantha and Lily, now a 7-year-old girl, made a small plaque. "Oscar, the cat who knew." Life went on. Lily grew up, bringing youth and joy to the ranch. Samantha got married and brought her husband to live nearby. George and Martha retired, but continued living on the property, now only helping when they wanted to, not because they needed to. Howard proved his worth over time. He was never fully forgiven by Diana and Miles, who moved on with their lives without looking back. But he found redemption in his mother's eyes, and that was enough. On a spring afternoon, 5 years after they married, Eleanor and Silas were on the porch, the same porch where it all began. "Tired?" asked Silas. "No," said Eleanor. "Satisfied." "Regret anything?" "Nothing," Eleanor assured him. "Every pain, every tear, every hard moment brought me here, and here is exactly where I want to be." "Me too," said Silas. "You know what I think sometimes," said Eleanor. "I think about what my life would be like if you had let me go that first day, if you had kept your heart closed." "I wouldn't be me," said Silas. "I'd still be that bitter, lonely man." "And I wouldn't be me," agreed Eleanor. "I'd still be that broken, abandoned woman." "So we saved each other," concluded Silas. "We did," agreed Eleanor. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Willow Creek Ranch was at peace. The people who lived there were at peace. And the two on the porch holding hands were at peace. "Silas," Eleanor called softly. "Yes?" "Thank you," she said, "for opening the gate that day, for giving me a chance, for turning my ending into a new beginning." "The thanks are all mine," said Silas, "for insisting, for staying, for teaching me how to live again." They stayed there until the stars came out, as they did every night, and in that moment, on that porch, on that ranch that witnessed so much transformation, two people who were lost had found each other. And that, more than anything else, was the true definition of home. The years that followed were kind to them, not without challenges. Life is never without challenges, but they faced everything together. Storms that destroyed part of the crop, the tough economy that affected the business, their health that began to weaken with age. But through it all, they remained united. The shelter project grew. What started as one house became 3. Dozens of people passed through, each carrying their own stories of pain and hope. Some put down roots in the region, others moved on to new horizons, but all carried the mark of the kindness they found. Mrs. Miller, the woman with a story so similar to Eleanor's, became a right hand in the project. Together they understood the nuances of abandonment, rebuilding, and hope against all odds. Mr. Higgins discovered a talent for carpentry and began teaching other residents. They created a small workshop that sold furniture to the community, generating income for the project. Frank, the man who had lost everything in a fire, became the manager of the small cooperative they formed. He discovered he had a knack for numbers and organization. The ranch was no longer just a ranch, it was an ecosystem of healing, second chances, and quiet redemptions. And at the center of it all, Eleanor and Silas. Growing old together, supporting each other, a living example that it's never too late to start over. Samantha had another child, a boy named Toby. Lily, now a teenager, helped with the shelter project during school breaks. She had a special affection for the elderly, inherited from her great-grandmother. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. Howard, who had arrived broken and remorseful, became a key part of the ranch. He managed the agricultural side competently, and more importantly, he had learned to be human again. He visited his mother every week, not out of obligation, but out of genuine, hard-won love. One day Diana appeared, not asking for forgiveness, just watching from afar. Eleanor saw her but didn't approach. Some bridges are burned irreparably. Diana stood there for half an hour, watching her mother work in the garden, laughing with other people alive and happy. Then she left and never returned. Miles sent letters occasionally, never asking for anything, just updating about his life. Eleanor read them but didn't reply. Forgiveness has its limits, and she had learned to respect hers. But with Jessica, even in death, there was peace. With Howard, there was reconciliation. With Samantha and the great-grandchildren, there was pure love. And with Silas, there was everything. "Are you afraid of when the end comes?" Eleanor asked one night, the question coming out of nowhere. Silas thought carefully. "No," he said. "I'm afraid of wasting the time we have, but of the end itself, no, because I have lived, truly, you taught me that." "And if I go first?" asked Eleanor, vulnerable. "Then I will celebrate that I had you," said Silas. "I will miss you every day, but I will keep living the way you taught me. And if you go first, then you keep being that force of nature that you are," said Silas. "You keep helping people. You keep transforming lives. You keep being you." "Promise?" "I promise," Silas assured. "But I also promise to fight for us to stay together as long as possible." And they fought. They cared for each other with tenderness. They reminded each other to take their medicine. They supported each other on walks that grew slower. They laughed at the little forgetfulness that age brought. It was in an especially beautiful spring that they decided to throw a party. 10 years since Eleanor arrived at the ranch, 10 years of transformation. They invited everyone, current and former employees, people who had passed through the assisted living facility, neighbors, the entire community. The ranch was celebrating. Music, food, joy, stories being shared, laughter echoing, children running. In the middle of the party, Silas asked for attention. 10 years ago, he began, a woman knocked on that gate. She was tired, broken, hopeless, and I, at the height of my stupidity, almost sent her away. Laughter from the crowd. But she insisted, and thanks to her insistence and to George's wisdom, he nodded to his friend, she stayed and transformed everything. This ranch, this community, and especially me. He looked at Eleanor, who stood beside him. "Eleanor taught me that it's never too late to change, that homes aren't made of walls but of people, that family is a choice, not just blood, and that love can happen at any age, in any form, as long as it's true." Applause erupted. "So today," Silas continued, "I want to celebrate not just 10 years, but every single day of these 10 years, every conversation on the porch, every challenge we faced together, every person we helped, every life we touched." He took Eleanor's hand. "And I want to celebrate you, my love, for being stubborn enough not to give up, for being strong enough to forgive, for being wise enough to teach, for being you." Eleanor was crying, but they were happy tears. "I should be the one thanking," she said to the crowd. "Because when I arrived here, I had nothing, and now I have everything. I have a home, I have a family, I have purpose, I have love." She looked around at all the people gathered. And I have you, every single one of you, because this, she gestured to the entire ranch, this isn't mine. It's ours. It belongs to everyone who has passed through here and left a piece of themselves. To everyone who has helped and then helped others. It's a community built on kindness. More applause, more tears, more hugs. The party continued late into the night. Music, dancing, pure joy. And when everyone had finally left, Silas and Eleanor were alone on the porch. Their porch. 10 years, Eleanor said in wonder. It feels like yesterday and it feels like a whole lifetime. It was a whole lifetime, said Silas, a good life. The best one, Eleanor agreed. They fell silent, just existing together. The kitten that Samantha had given to Eleanor, Oscar's grandson, she insisted, even though it was impossible, slept at their feet. Silas. Yes? If you had to do it all over again, would you change anything? Silas thought. Maybe I would have opened the gate faster that first day, he said. But otherwise, nothing, absolutely nothing. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, said Silas, because they were the ones that taught us, that shaped us, that brought us here. Eleanor agreed in silence. And you? Asked Silas. Would you change anything? Maybe I would have been less stubborn with my children when they were young, reflected Eleanor. Maybe I would have set clearer boundaries. Maybe I would have valued myself more. But I can't change the past, said Eleanor. I can only live in the present and build the future, and in that I have no complaints. The moon was high when they finally decided to go inside. They walked slowly, leaning on each other, to the room they shared. There, surrounded by photos of happy moments, by memories of a decade of love, they slept side by side. Two survivors who found in each other not just companionship, but redemption. And the ranch around them rested too, preparing for another day of life, of work, of love, of second chances, because that was what that place had become, a living monument to the possibility of starting over, no matter the age, no matter how broken you are, no matter how many times you've fallen. There is always a gate waiting to be opened. There is always a hand ready to be extended. There is always hope that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. And sometimes, just sometimes, all we need is the courage to knock on that gate and the luck to find someone willing to open it. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you think Eleanor made the right choice in forgiving some and not others? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, more importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.